A pleasant good morning and welcome to the second of our webinar series looking at reformulating the food environment, a look at fats, sugars, and salts. Our focus today will be on sugars. Now, our conversation today is taking place in a context of an unacceptably high burden of non-communicable diseases, NCDs, in the Caribbean, with skyrocketing rates of overweight and obesity among children and adults, some of the highest rates in the world. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has also exposed the weaknesses in our local food environments, with access to fresh fruits and vegetables, provision of healthy diets for children, and the supply chain infrastructure to get fresh produce from farm to table being affected. Unhealthy diets dominated by cheap, easily accessible, and readily consumed ultra-processed and processed foods that are high in fats, sugars, and salts are one of the major risk factors of NCDs. One of the areas of focus of the National Food Industry an initiative to encourage our food manufacturers to voluntarily pledge to reduce the amount of salt, sugar, saturated and trans fat in their products, as dietary factors including high intake of salt, saturated fat, and sugar from processed foods contributes to the high prevalence of NCDs, including high blood pressure, obesity, cardiovascular diseases, and diabetes in Jamaica. Product reformulation in processing of food provides an excellent opportunity for improving the health status of our population through improvement of the nutritional properties of the food intended for common daily consumption. Companies are being encouraged to provide healthier, low-cost foods that can easily be accessed through the food supply chain. Reformulation of our food systems has the potential to support the reduction in NCDs, especially among those disadvantaged population groups, and their unequal representation as being the most affected by health. We also know that all our efforts towards reducing these lifestyle diseases can easily be thwarted because very few people in our population can resist the taste of sweet foods. Hence, our focus today is on sugars. And to help us better understand how and why the reformulation of the food environment with respect to sugar is so important, and of course, how it can be practically done. Today, we have with us a panel of expert presenters who will be enlightening us about how best to approach reformulating our food environment with respect to sugars. We're now going to hear from Mr. Rashid Perry, public health nutritionist and food scientist at the University of Technology, Jamaica. Now, Mr. Perry is a proud graduate of the University of Technology, and he currently serves as a lecturer within the School of Allied Health and Wellness in the College of Health Sciences at the university. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Dietetics and Nutrition, as well as a Master's degree in Public Health Nutrition, both from the institution. His areas of expertise include food formulation, medicinal cannabis, and nutraceutical sciences. Of course, his research interests include nutrient food composition analysis, food security, endocannabinoid food interplay, and drug nutrient interactions. In our college, he is well known as the jack of all trades due to his willingness always to participate in and learn other professional activities, which he uses always to enrich his own. He's also a well-published researcher, very dynamic presenter as you're about to experience, and a teacher at heart. Mr. Perry, I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barrow. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I must apologize from now. As you can see with my background, my presentation is going to be quite sweet. So I apologize for any feelings you may feel at the end, but it's imperative that we go through what we're about to discuss. So let me share my screen so that we can begin. All right. So for today's presentation, we'll be discussing the functions of sugars in products and factors affecting consumer acceptance. Now, as I said before, this presentation is coming from the viewpoint of sugars in food, you know, what they are, what are some uses, and how do these sugars influence the foods that we do accept or the foods that we actually go for. So the outline for my presentation is as follows. So we're going to start with a little introduction. I'm somewhat of a storyteller, so follow me along as we look at the different layers of the story I'm about to tell. So we have our introduction, then we're going to look at the sources and types of sugar. We're going to look at the functions of sugars in products, the functions of sugars in consumer acceptance, which is very important, and of course, the takeaway from my storytelling session. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define a few words, right? So that we can follow along. Now, the first term we're going to define is food. Now, food is any substance that we eat or drink or that is taken into the body to sustain life, right? Now, the benefits that food provides is that it provides energy, growth and development, and repair and maintenance of our bodies. Now, from a biological standpoint, food is needed to sustain life. We all know that. We need to eat. However, from a humanistic perspective, food has a greater effect on one's being, right? And most of us can attest. When you get something that you particularly like, a particular food, and you eat it, it's like the whole world stops for a moment in time, right? And that's the kind of effect that food has. Now, food is seen as, at least to me, a culinary melting pot of flavors and aromas. What do I mean? For the most part, once you're having something that you particularly like and you're consuming it, it's like a party that is happening in your mouth, in your brain, in the entire body. Now, one particular ingredient that allows for this party to take place is, of course, sugar. Now, oftentimes, when you hear the word sugar, the first thing that comes to mind is sucrose. And another name for sucrose is table sugar. Now, the sugar you have at home on the counter in the fridge. Now, sucrose is not the only sugar, as you would have seen in Miss Kane's presentation. We have other sugars as well. Now, sugars are generally natural, they're sweet tasting, and they provide energy. Now, some sources of sugars that we have are beets, cane, honey, corn, fruits, and of course, vegetables. Now, with that being said, for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to break down our sugars into two groups. right? Now, sugars belong to this broad category called carbohydrates. Don't worry about it. Um, we're going to go through it so that we can understand the flow throughout. Now, what we're going to do for this presentation, simply put, we're just going to divide carbohydrates into two groups. So we're going to call the one group simple and the other complex. Now, there are many differences between the two, but one of the chief characteristic differences has to do with the sweetness. So for example, if you should compare like a ripe banana with a green banana, you'll realize that the ripe banana is sweet, the green banana is not so sweet. That's a way you can tell the difference between simple sugars and complex sugars. Now let's look at sources and types of sugars. Now, if I should go through every single type of sugar that is available, it is going to be a very long day. But what I've done is just to choose a few, some of the more common ones that you'd have seen on the market or sugars you may have at home. And we're going to use those as a basis of our discussion. Now, before we start, there's one important aspect that many of us tend to ignore. When we are buying food, oftentimes we do not read the label, right? Now, when you're buying a piece of clothing, you check to ensure it's your size, you check to see the material that is there, and you check for the cost. When it comes to food, we have a tendency of looking at the front of the label, looking at the name. If you have any allergies, then you will try to see if there are any allergens that may trigger you. You look at the outside packaging of the food, and then you purchase. But oftentimes we don't turn it around just to see what is on the back of the label itself. Now, for this presentation, since we're focusing on sugars, the area that you will see the actual sugars that make up the product are in the ingredient list. Now, the ingredient list is listed in such a way that the food item that contributes most to that product is listed first. So in other words, it's listed in descending order. So you have the food item that makes up most of the product listed first, and then it decreases as you go along. So if you pick up a food item and the first ingredient is sugar, that means sugar makes up most of the item. Now, oftentimes the names that are used on the labels are not so familiar. So if you see, for example, fructose or maltodextrin or maltulose, it may go over our heads sometimes because we're not familiar with other terms for sugars. So what you find is we tend not to pay much attention to the ingredient list, but it's very important to identify the sugars that are within the foods that we're eating. And as we go along, you will see why. So the first sugar we're going to discuss, of course, is molasses. Now, molasses is that byproduct that you obtain from the processing of sugar from sugar beets or sugar cane. Now, molasses is made up of sucrose, and sucrose is made up of two smaller sugars, one glucose and one fructose. What I want you to do is take note of how many times you see the word sucrose, glucose, and fructose in this presentation. Now, molasses contain very low levels of minerals, especially calcium and iron. Now, you'll find molasses being used in cookies, biscuits, and even baked beans. Yes, there is sugar in the baked beans. That characteristic sweet taste that you're getting is not coming from the beans, but from the added sugars. I mean, things like these we don't really take into consideration. The next one we're going to look at is starch syrup derivatives. Now, these are, as the name suggests, are derivatives from starch, and they are used as fat replacers, meaning that if, for example, I have a product and I want to reduce the fat content, I can actually increase the sugar content while at the same time reducing the fat content. They're also used to improve texture, how the food feels in the mouth, They impart nutritional properties. So if you have, let's say, a shake and you want to increase the energy profile of the shake, starch derivatives are often used. And they're also used for temperature stability. If you have a particular, let's say, dessert that you would like to keep refrigerated, but you don't want ice crystals to be formed, sugars can be used to prevent that as well. Now, some of the common terms that you may see are maltulose, maltotriose, maltodextrins, dextrins, and the list continues. Now, of course, you find starch syrup derivatives being used in confectionaries like your candies and chocolates, baked products, frozen foods, and of course, beverages. So far, what you're seeing is most of the packaged items that we do consume have some amount of sugars within them. Next, we have high fructose corn syrup, which has come under a lot of scrutiny because of the health effects that it has had on us as human beings. Now, high fructose corn syrup, as the name suggests, comes from corn. Now, further processing produces what is known as high fructose corn syrup 42. It just means that it has 42% fructose, right? Because in corn syrup, you have a ratio of glucose and fructose. Now, further processing past that will give you high fructose corn syrup 55, which is much sweeter than 42. What you'll realize is for most of the sugars, to improve on the sweetness, more fructose is added. Why? Because fructose is the sweetest sugar when compared to the others. Now, as a result of a comparable sweetening strength, high fructose corn syrup has replaced many sugars in sweet foods. Now, one of the reasons why it has replaced many of the sugars is because it is cheap to procure, and therefore manufacturing costs are a little less compared to using other sugars. So you'll find high fructose corn syrup in a myriad of products because it's a lot cheaper. Now, the benefits that manufacturers have when they use high fructose corn syrup in that it increases the shelf life, meaning say you have a particular food item you'd like to store in the freezer, but you don't want ice crystals to be formed, and you want to keep the natural texture, you may add that as well. It helps to retain moisture in bran cereals and breakfast bars. It enhances fruit and spice flavors. And of course, for those items that have a brown coating or a caramelized look, high fructose corn syrup has been found to be very effective there as well. Next, we have table sugar, which is the one that we're all familiar with. Now, table sugar is also known as sucrose, and it contains both glucose and fructose as well. Now, table sugar you can get from cane or beets, and it's often used as the standard measurement of sweetness. So when we're talking about a scale of sweetness and sugars that are most sweet to least sweet, it is compared to table sugar. Now, table sugar is one of those sugars that we have readily available in our homes. You may add it to your drink item, you may add it to your cereal, you may add it to your porridge, the list goes on, right? But you also find sucrose being used in products as well. And lastly, we have honey. Now, honey, of course, as you know, is made by our friendly bees. Now, honey consists of the carbohydrates fructose and glucose. Now, honey contains additional substances that provides the human body with other benefits, right? But please be mindful, not because it's honey, you are going to have it in excess, because honey in excess will also have health consequences as well. Now, An important note is that honey should not be given to any child under the age of 1. Why? Because honey by itself has some small organisms that are bacteria called Clostridium botulinum. And this causes infant botulism. Now, it's very easy for parents not to know this. And when they have started to complementary feed the baby, meaning, after mommy has fed the baby for 6 months and then, the parents want to introduce certain foods to the infant after the 6-month period, they may make some oats or some porridge, and then you add honey to it and you give the infant. Try as best as possible not to do this because of the natural spores that are found inside honey. Now, honey is used in baked goods, desserts, and of course, toppings. When you go to the ice cream store and you buy ice cream, honey is often a topping. They'll ask you, you add your honey, and that completes your purchase, right? Now, with that being said, let's now look at how these substances or compounds or sugars are used in the various products that we consume. Now, the functions I'm listing here are not exhausted, right? They're just a few functions which jump out at us when we talk about sugars. Now, sugars have a myriad of other functions like bulking agents, preservatives. They're used in fermentation, for example, in bread making, etc. But for the most part, we're going to stick to some characteristics that jump out at you when we speak about sugars. Now, the first one we have is, of course, its chief characteristic, sweetness. Now, sugars are used as sweeteners in many kinds of food products. Now, as we said before, fructose is the sweetest sugar, and lactose is the least sweetest sugar. Now, one of the reasons why sweetness is so important in a lot of the products is that it improves palatability, meaning the taste, flavor, texture of the item, and of course, imparts a certain aroma that is very attractive. Now, sweetness is very, very important. As we go along, you're going to see why sweetness is one of those characteristics that you find in many products that are very attractive. And of course, once it has the right amount of sweetness, you will have increased consumer acceptance. Now, take a look at these two images. We have plain cornflakes and we have cornflakes with sugar. Now, for the most part, generally, when we're having cornflakes, let's say plain cornflakes, you will add your milk, but then you realize, it doesn't have a certain level of sweetness. So you add a little sugar and then you mix. And then you add a little more sugar and then you add a little more sugar. What you're finding is, for the most part, what you're trying to do is to get that characteristic sweetness. So what you'll find most persons will do is they'll gravitate to having their cornflakes with a little sugar compared not to having any sugar at all. Now, the next time you go to the supermarket, check the shelves. Most of the cereal that you see on the shelves have added sugar. Very few you will see that are marked plain without sugar added. Bear that in mind, and there's a reason why the cereals with sugar are more attractive. Next, we have flavor. Now, by this time, again, I apologize, you must be starving, all right? I'm starving myself just looking at these images. Now, flavor is a very important aspect of sugar complementing foods, in that it is able to suppress other basic tastes like bitter and sour, and it is also able to bring out very, let's say, meaty flavors. So when you add a little sugar to your stewed chicken, or you add it to your you add some barbecue sauce to your baked chicken, it gives it another level of flavor and sweetness, and it tends to be very attractive because the flavor combinations tend to pull you towards that particular item. Now, for sour applications like jams, sugars are added. Why? Because the sugars help to round out the taste. That's why when you have jam, you have that mixture between sour and sweet, and it tends to be balanced between the two. Next, we have applications such as the bitter applications, chocolate and coffee. Now, chocolate and coffee, dark chocolate and coffee tends to be quite bitter, right? But when you add sugar, it lessens that bitter taste and gives you more of that sweet taste, while at the same time giving you a slight hint of bitterness, which tends to be quite attractive to many customers. You also find sugars being used in a lot of the medications that you can get over the counter, like cough syrups. You find that more and more cough syrups are using high fructose corn syrup because it's better able to disguise that bitter taste. If you taste unsweetened cough syrup compared to sweetened cough syrup, you would go for the sweetened cough syrup because the sugar is able to round out that bitter taste so that it doesn't overpower your taste buds. Next, we have color. Now, sugar gives color to the food product. Sugar in products gives rise to browning and flavoring, such as bread, coffee, heated desserts, beverages, and cakes. Now, the image I'm about to show you is quite interesting because color often tells us, even before you have it, what it's going to taste like, what flavor it's going to be, and whether it is going to be acceptable to you or not. Look at these two images. The one on the left is plain popcorn with butter and salt. The one on the right is caramel popcorn. Now, looking at the two, immediately your eyes are pulled towards the caramel popcorn. Why? The color is rich. You can see the glossiness on it. Immediately, you start to perceive what the texture is going to feel like and what it actually starts tasting like. And this attractiveness will pull consumers towards these foods. Why? Because it looks more rich and wholesome just on the appearance compared to regular popcorn, which is white and yellow with salt and butter. So here you see where sugars are used to improve the color of the item so that when consumers do see these items, they tend to gravitate to colors that are more rich, especially in the Caribbean. We tend to like colors that are rich, that are darker. We gravitate mostly to those items, which is quite interesting. Now, the last function we're going to look at is texture. Now, texture is a little bit different because oftentimes, depending on what the target is for that product, the texture may change. So take for cotton candy, for example, cotton candy, the reason why your cotton candy is so fluffy and light, again, is because of the properties of sugar, which allows it to get to this state. Now, if you're at an event where you have children, of course, you may find a lot of cotton candy being sold because for the most part, it is marketed towards the younger grouping, even though we will eat cotton candy across the life cycle. You also have another extreme where sugars may be used to make much harder products, for example, like caramelized peanuts, which tends to be a lot harder and firmer. You may find more or less this being marketed to older persons. However, children are also having these items as well. Now, with that being said, by this time, you would have had an idea of what aspects of sugars are affecting our acceptance of these products. But, just to solidify what we've learned so far, let's see. So of course, the first one we're going to have is sweetness. Now, remember I said to you before that sweetness is an important characteristic. And this is why. Sweetness is an innate liking. Let me repeat. Sweetness is an innate liking. What do I mean? The moment you are conceived, you are born with a liking for sugar. Now, the question may be asking is why? Now, the body's primary energy source is sugar. A characteristic of sugar is sweetness. Therefore, more sweetness equals more energy. Your body needs energy. So you find that we're born with that predisposition of liking sweetness. So that's why you find that many products may be marketed on the basis of sweetness because we generally have a liking for sweetness. Now, this liking for sweetness is often shaped after we have been born. So in other words, our socialization and cultural experiences. Now, what you find is, especially for a lot of us growing up, um, when your parents would buy snacks or juices for you, you find that these snacks and juices are given ever so often. They're given as snacks. You bring them to school. You have them at home, or you may have them for breakfast, whatever the case may be. But what is actually happening is this introduction of sweetness at such a young age, because a lot of these drink items, if you should pull one of these boxes that have been marketed for children as an adult and you taste it, it is quite sweet to you. But for them, but for children, it's perfect. It's like it's like an explosion of fun for them when they're having these drink items. Now, one of the reasons is the younger you are, the more you prefer, sorry, you prefer more intense concentrations of sweetness compared to when you become an adult. Now, you do have variations to that. Where
Perry,
you, yes,
wrap up.
okay, where you do have variations to that. Now, sweetness has been used as a mechanism to relieve a lot of the stress that we may feel, as well as depression as well. Next, we have is flavor. By increasing the flavor of the item, you actually increase consumer acceptance. So where you have like cookies and baked goods, the moment you smell them, you already perceive what they taste like, and you start gravitating towards it because it has a particular flavor that you may be exposed to. And the last area we'll look at is color and texture. Now, color and texture tends to vary depending on your socialization, but for the most part, we tend to be influenced by what we see. And for us in the Caribbean, the richer the color, the greater the acceptance of the product. Now, looking at these two images, we have one plain cake and one cake that has been frosted. Immediately, your eyes move towards a cake that has been frosted because immediately you have already perceived what it tastes like, what the texture is like, and what the flavor is. And you immediately gravitate towards that product. Now, to wrap up quickly, because I know we're out of time, sugars form an integral part of our food landscape. Now, the uses will range from color to taste. And what you find is cost is a driving factor for many manufacturers. And so you'll find that high fructose corn syrup is commonly utilized. Our innate liking for sugar is one which drives our consumption for the most part. But in addition to that, sweetness, flavor, aroma, color, and texture also add to that compounding factor, which has also been influenced by our socialization. And with that, I thank you.
Mr. Perry, want to say thank you for your sweet presentation. It has certainly highlighted for us the magnitude of the challenge that is ahead and why reformulation is so important. At this time, I encourage us not to reach for anything sweet, but instead, we want you to stand for a little while, and I'm going to hand it over to Miss Morrison and Mr. Miguel to engage us in a health break, and then we will continue with our presentations. Please continue to post your question and answers in the QA section, and we will facilitate them later on in the webinar.
Okay, and so just to say we're going to jump into it, we're having a fitness break provided by the team at Jamaica Moves.
Hi, I'm Erica Brown-Riley, and I'm the Regional Physical Activity Specialist here in the Western region. Now, we are about to get moving in the seated position. Yes, you heard right, in the seated position. Now, there is a new trend of thought that sitting is the new smoking. And we know that sometimes it is unavoidable that we sit, but it doesn't mean that you can't get your limbs moving while seated. Now we're going to get moving with our heads up and down. 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're going to get our shoulders in. Now most time when we are sitting, we're in a slouched position, and this can cause our shoulders muscles to hurt or chest to be tight. And when we're in this position, we don't get enough oxygen as efficiently as we should. So it is important that you get your shoulders moving, prevent tightness in the chest area so we can get efficient oxygen flow to the lungs. So 1, 2, 3, 4. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's get the elbows in. 1, 2, 3, 4 to the side. 1, 2, 3, 4 more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now for persons who are always at their computer, they may have shocking sensations or tingling or pain in the hands. This is called carpal tunnel. So it is very important that we keep our joints of the wrist and the fingers moving. So let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and rotate. 1, 2, 3, 4. Open, close, open. Close the fingers, open. Close one more time, open. Close, open, close. Awesome. Now when you are sitting, it is very common for the hips to get tight and for your knees to hurt, especially when you stand. So it is important that you get your hips and your knees into the movement. So let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Get the knees in and out, in, out, in, out, in, out. One more set, and 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, even when you're sitting, we can get that abdominals moving and our core, which is abs and your lower back. Very important, especially in the seated position. As persons who sit for long, they can have severe back pain. So, one of the things that you can do while seated to get your core engaged, which is your abdominals and the lower back, lean back so you're at the edge of the chair. Hands to the edge of the chair, lean back, and in and out, in and out. Let's go. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. One more set, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Next side. 3, 4. One more time, in and out, in and out. One more time, in and out, and in and out. Awesome. Awesome. Good. That was good working out. You might feel a little burn, but that is okay as long as you are moving. Now, when we sit for long, some persons may have swelling in the feet, and this is indicative that you have circulatory problems. So it is important that you get your ankles in the movement so you have proper blood flow back to the heart. So let's go. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 more times. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now we have worked practically all the joints of the body. So let's get everything moving. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to do some stretching exercises, very important while you're sitting, as those muscles can become very tight and very painful. So let's start with the head, over to the side, and 4, 3, 2, 1. Next side. 4, 3, 2, 1. Up. 4, 3, 2, 1. Down. 3, 2, 1. Rotate. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now remember that when we're sitting, if our posture is slouched, it can actually decrease the amount of oxygen that enters the lung. So you want to get those pectoralis elongated, stretched so they don't become tight. So hold back for 4, 3, 2, 1, and forward. 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do that one more time. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Now we're going to take our right hands, place it right across the chest, pull it in as much as possible, and so we're working and stretching those muscles of the arm. We can get the wrist and the fingers in at the same time, so we are preventing carpal tunnel syndrome. A lot of persons who work with computers, they may get this syndrome, and so it is important that you keep your wrists and your finger muscles flexible. 3, 2, 1, and next side. 4, 3. Now remember that when you're sitting for long, you're in this position quite some time, which can cause tightening of these muscles here. So it is important that you stretch them regularly. And so we're going to pull up, 2, 3, 4, and then out, 2, 3, 4, up, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4. Let's move over to the other side. Up, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, up, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4. Also, we can get the ankles in, up and rotate, up, down and rotate, up, down and rotate. Next side. full body movement while you are sitting. So remember, physical inactivity kills, so always keep your body moving. I am your regional physical activity specialist here in the Western region saying bye.
Time we're going to have a joint presentation done by Mr. Valmo Winter and Ms. Katie Ann Sims. Now, Mr. Winter is team leader, food research and development within the food unit, product research and development division of the Scientific Research Council. He has an MSc in food science and technology, as well as over 30 years experience in the food industry. Ms. Sims is a research scientist, also at the SRC, with over 6 years experience in food product engineering and consulting. Her scope of work involves utilizing scientific principles in product development for commercialization purposes. She also has experience as a medical technologist, having worked with intercommercial distributors for 5 years prior to joining the team at the SRC. She was educated at the University of the West Indies, Mona, where she obtained an MPhil in organic chemistry and a Bachelor of Science degree in general chemistry and food chemistry. She also has a certificate in supervisory management from the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean. So I now hand over to Ms. Sims and Mr. Winter.
Hi, good morning, everyone. All right, so today we'll be looking at the practical solutions for sugar reduction while reformulating our products. All right, so when you're reformulating a product, there are many things to consider. You need to be able to understand the physical and microstructural properties of each raw material, as well as the end product. You need to ensure that the desired properties in terms of the quality and safety are maintained, and that will include the shelf life and storage conditions. Of course, you need to ensure that the flavor profile and organoleptic properties are maintained. So if it is that it's something that is already on the market and persons are used to it, when you reformulate your product, you need to ensure that that flavor profile is consistent, as well as the aesthetics. Excuse me. So if you started with a purple drink with pieces of fruit, after your reformulation, if you're not going to rebrand, then you need to get a purple drink with pieces of fruit at the end. Every ingredient plays an important role in your meal or your product. So removing sugar from a product often requires replacing it with other ingredients to preserve its texture, taste, and quality. Gradually decreasing the sugar in a product may reduce the overall sugar by getting consumers accustomed to a less sweet taste over time without affecting the product perception. So you don't want to decrease the sugar in one go. You want to go a small percentage each time so that the palate gets accustomed to the new product that you're going to, or the new flavor profile that you're going to put on the market. Okay. So our panelists before went through a whole host of things about sugar and how to spot the different types of sugar in your products. Just to give you a brief overview of what sugar does in your product. So it provides flavor, it adds texture and viscosity. As was explained, it provides color. It increases the tenderness, that is the mouthfeel of your product. It helps to promote lightness in baked goods, and that is the airiness, the fluffiness that you experience when you bite into a cake or a cookie. And that is because it interacts with the leavening agents to create the air pockets. It provides structure in baked goods by interacting with protein sources so that it prevents cracks. So you get that smooth finish on your products, as well as it may act as preservatives in some products. So what are the implications of removing or reducing the sugar in your product? Reduction or elimination of sugar is more challenging than just simply replacing it with a non-caloric or nutritive sweetener. This is because there's this complex combination of textures and tastes. Of course, as I explained before, if the consumers already know of this product, it is going to be difficult to just change it like that without it affecting their perception. Of course, this will result in a less than preferred taste and the texture and the mouthfeel of the product. So right now, I will just go through, in terms of the different types of products, how you can reduce the sugars. So in baked goods, you can use up to 1/3 less the amount of sugar in your recipes. And of course, sugars is not just sugar, as we have learned before, honey, molasses, and all the other names that they may use to code it by in our ingredients list. We can try to increase the spices and the flavors that we use to compensate. So if it is that you're making a cake or a drink, say a milk-based drink, you can increase the spices such as your vanilla, nutmeg, the almond extract, etc., just so that you can have different flavors on your taste buds so that persons may not miss the amount of sugar that you have reduced. We can use our fresh fruits or dried fruits, like our raisins, which are naturally sweet, and our bananas instead of sugars. And we can also try to replace our canned fruits that are generally packaged in syrup with that packaged in water. And we know that fruits are seasonal, so we will have to try and get whatever fruit for your product. So you can use the canned option, but be sure to use the one packaged in water. To reduce sugar in beverages, you can try to go as low as 3/4 of the amount of sugar that you originally had. And we can say, in terms of like with the flavored water as opposed to a juice, when you drink a flavored water, you don't miss the sugar that much because it's not just plain water that you're drinking. So it has some amount of sugar, but it is not as sweet as some of the other products that you may consume. You can consider using an artificial sweetener such as, or natural sweetener such as stevia, artificial sweetener such as aspartame. Reduce the amount of acid that will give a tart taste. So when you reduce the amount of sugar, you have to reduce the amount of acid, which my co-presenter will go a little bit more in depth, just to show how to balance the taste of the new product that you're formulating. And of course, since sugar affects the texture of the product, when you remove the sugar, you may want to add a thickening agent or a stabilizer to help to preserve the mouthfeel and the texture of the product. And in our candies, we can consider the sugar substitute isomalt, which is a type of sugar alcohol, and it is low calorie and it has little to no effect on blood sugar levels. So I will now turn over to Mr. Winter so that he can continue. Sorry.
Good morning, everyone. The process of reformulation is a very complex one, especially when it comes on to replacing sugar, because sugar does so much to make our food, beverages, and so on taste acceptable and nice to us. Now, first to reformulate, we need certain instruments. For example, we'll need a refractometer, and a refractometer is used to test the level of sugar in the product. And when we use refractometer, we get what we call the bricks, which is the percentage of sugar in the product. Now, we also need our pH meter, because one of the ingredients we will be adjusting during the reformulation is the acid. That was mentioned before. The acid helps in improving the flavor, but enhancing the flavor of beverages and other foods. But it is twofold. It also reduces the pH of the beverage or the food. This is important because in reducing you have to reduce the pH of the beverage to prevent the growth of certain pathogenic organisms. So it is the acid in the beverage is twofold, enhancing flavor and also protecting us from food poisoning or such. We also need our scale, which is very important. You have to do you have to weigh the ingredients in order to reformulate your product successfully. Now let's look at what we call the original formulation, and it has various ingredients. You have water, the watermelon juice, sugar, citric acid, watermelon flavor, potassium sorbate, and xanthan gum. Now, notice the proportion of these ingredients all add up to 100%. So each ingredient is specific in terms of the proportion. Now we're looking at water, which is 69.6%. That will be adjusted whenever the sugar is reduced, and so have to compensate for the loss of these ingredients and to balance back out with the total proportion of 100%. So now let's look at the second formulation here, which is called, it's a reduced sugar formulation from the first. All the ingredients that are subjected to change are highlighted in red here. So below this water is reduced to 75% in this beverage. The sugar is reduced to 3.5%. But maltodextrin is also added, and the purpose of the maltodextrin is to improve the mouthfeel. The citric acid, as we mentioned before, is to enhance flavor and also reduce the pH of the product. Now, whenever the sugar is reduced in these products, as I mentioned before, the texture is affected, the mouthfeel is affected, and so the tartness or the harshness of the citric acid will be more pronounced. So it has to be reduced proportionately to lower that harsh effect. And we can combat these by adding the effect. We can improve the texture of the product by adding xanthan gum, which will replace the texture that is lost when the sugar is replaced or reduced. Notice ingredients such as potassium sorbate remains the same because this will not change, because it serves the function just as in the original product and as the reduced sugar product. Now let's look at the next formulation, which in this formulation the sugar is totally removed. So you will notice also that
it appears that Mr. Winter is having some technical difficulties.
Okay, sorry about that. I am back. We had some loss of internet a while ago, so.
Yes, we understand. You can continue. You can probably advance to the next slide now.
Okay, I was on the third formulation that we mentioned, this in which we reduce the sugar completely. And so reducing sugar completely, we also have to add sweeteners as well. And in our experience, we use the blend result in less aftertaste, less undesirable effect from the addition of sweeteners, which is commonly experienced. So the blend generally contains, for example, 2 or 3 different artificial sweeteners. Now, there are other blends that are being developed that can reduce the level of sugar up to 50% in beverages and up to 100% in ice creams and so on. It also replaces can also replace sugar up to 75% in granola bars. And these mainly consist of sugar alcohols. This describes allulose, and this is combined with other disaccharides to give you these type of sweetener systems. You can contact us at the Scientific Research Council, 927-177-124, or website www.src.gov.jn. Or email us at src@src-jamaica.org. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your presentation. And we're going to go straight into our last presentation, which will be done for us by Ms. Philippa O'Connor. Now, Ms. O'Connor is a Senior Standards Officer at the Bureau of Standards, Jamaica. She is a meticulously detailed and organized quality professional with over 8 years experience in standards development, conformity assessment, and technical regulations at the Bureau of Standards. She also holds a Bachelor of Science in Dietetics and Nutrition and manages the national discussions with respect to nutrition and front of package labeling in Jamaica. So we now hand over to Ms. O'Connor to tell us some of the opportunities for nutrition claims and labeling, what currently exists in Jamaica and the Caribbean. Ms. O'Connor.
All right, thank you again for the introduction. I will be making a very brief presentation on nutrition claims and nutrition labeling and what currently exists in Jamaica. And as mentioned earlier, my name is Philippa O'Connor and I am with the Bureau of Standards Jamaica. All right, so let's get into the presentation. So the content of this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on definition for nutrition claims and nutrition labeling. We're also going to be taking a look at the existing regulations and pending regulations for nutrition labeling claims and claims in Jamaica and the Caribbean. And then we're going to explore some of the benefits and the implications of nutrition claims and labeling for the food industry, the consumer, and the government of Jamaica. So I have a very colorful illustration here demonstrating different types of claims. Fiber rich, 100% trans fat free, light, no added color, baked not fried, no MSG, no preservatives, and high protein. So what are nutrition claims? Any representation which states, suggests, or implies that a food has particular nutritional properties, including but not limited to the energy value and to the content of protein, fat, and carbohydrates, as well as the content of vitamins and minerals. What is nutritional labeling? It's a listing of the level of nutrients as displayed on the food label, and it is meant to provide the factual information about the nutritional content of the product. And I have a small little diagram here detailing or giving an example of what a nutritional facts panel would be looking like and the different listing of nutrients. And we're going to get into a little bit more details into that in the subsequent aspects of the presentation. So having defined what a nutrition claim is and what is nutritional labeling, we want to take a further look at the different types of claims. And in accordance with the Codex guideline for using claims, there are 3 different types of claims. There's a nutrient content claim, there's a comparative claim, and there's a nutrient function claim. So what is the nutrient content claim? Content, as the name denotes, it describes the level of a nutrient contained in a food. So for example, if you see a food label bearing source of calcium, low in fat, or high in fiber, then you know definitely it's making reference to a content claim. There's also the comparative claim, and this compares nutrient levels and or energy value of 2 or more foods. And I have an example here of a Heinz ketchup And it's mentioned reduced sugar. So where you see reduced or less than, fewer, increased, or more than, you can know for sure it's making reference to a comparative claim. Lastly, we are taking a look at the function claim. So what is a nutrient function claim? It describes the physiological role of the nutrient in both the development and the normal functions of the body. So for example, this beautiful picture that I have here demonstrating a milk, it's making reference to the fact that omega-3 supports brain health. So omega-3 assists with the physiological role in terms of normal functions of the body. And in this case, it would be brain health. So having established the different types of claims, what exists in Jamaica and the Caribbean that would speak to nutrition labeling and nutrition claims in terms of regulations? Now, currently in Jamaica and also in CARICOM, there exists the JSCRS 5 2010 Jamaican Standard Specification for the labeling of prepackaged foods. And in Jamaica, there's the Food and Nutrition Food Security Policy. So these are two current existing documentation that supports nutritional labeling and nutrition claims. And I'm going to get into a little bit more detailed in the subsequent slides. Now, what is the JSCRS 5? As the name denotes, CRS is an indication that it's a CARICOM standard. And so in that same breath, the CRS 5 is a regional standard that is used right across the CARICOM scope. So each member state in CARICOM utilizes this standard as the specification for the labeling of prepackaged foods. So all prepackaged foods within CARICOM would have to comply with the requirements of CRS 5. And the JS before the CRS is an indication that Jamaica has adopted it. So it's pretty much saying Jamaican Standard, CARICOM Regional Standard 5, 2010, Jamaican Standard Specification for the labeling of prepackaged foods. Now, let's talk about nutrition claims and nutrition labeling as required by CRS 5. There's an annex in CRS 5 and it's normative. And in standards writing, we have two different types of annexes. We have a normative annex and an informative annex. An informative annex, as the name suggests, it only provides information. However, a normative annex is compulsory. So it means then that the requirements or the information contained therein, it's a requirement. So there's an annex in the CRS 5, Annex A, and it makes provision for the use of claims. So it provides basic guidance as to how you would use, under what circumstances you would use a claim. And the nutritional labeling, however, it's currently voluntary. Now, that's going to be changed in the very short order, and I will get into a lot more details in the subsequent slides. But there's currently, in the 2010 version of the CRS 5, the only instance where you are required to use nutritional labeling is where you make a claim. Now, other than that, currently nutritional labeling in Jamaica and in CARICOM at this point in time is voluntary. If a member state, for example, Jamaica, wishes to export, then you know that different markets have a different market access requirement. So if Jamaica wants to export to the USA requires that products bear a nutritional facts panel. And so in order to meet that market access requirement, Jamaica would need to put on a nutritional facts panel for the different category of products that they wish to export. However, for the domestic market here in Jamaica, nutritional labeling is not mandatory at the moment. And I must indicate also that the CRS 5 standard, it is mandatory, meaning that every processor of prepackaged food has to comply with the requirements of this standard. I also want to note that currently the CRS 5 standard is under revision to include front of package labeling. Now, there exists also a food and nutrition food security policy. And this was developed by the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, and it's dated 2013. The purpose of the policy is that it provides strategies and actions and framework within which critical issues of food and nutrition security will be addressed. Now, I made mention of what exists, and that would be the CRS-5 specification, as well as the food and nutrition security policy. Now, we do have a few regulations that are under development, and as my slide colorfully denotes, these regulations, they are under construction. So let's begin with this exciting matter that is on most persons' lips at the moment. Now, the draft CARICOM Regional Nutritional Labeling Standard is under development, and the work is being spearheaded by CARICOM member state, Jamaica. So we meaning Jamaica, we host the CARICOM committee for drafting this nutritional labeling standard. And this standard, it makes references to the CACGL 23 1997, and that's the Codex Guideline for the Use of Nutrition Claims. And as I made mention earlier, the standard is currently under development. It is also intended to be made mandatory in CARICOM member states. And the rationale for that, as I made mention earlier also, is that currently nutritional labeling is voluntary. And so the intention is that for this to be published, estimated by December 2022. And thereafter, the recommendation is for each CARICOM member state to adopt this nutritional labeling standard with a mandatory implementation. It also forms a part of the region's thrust to assist or to put some form of program in place to assist with the reduction of non-communicable diseases, NCDs. And so the intention is that the nutritional labeling standard will work in tandem with the CRS-5, and that's a specification for the labeling of prepackaged foods, with the intention that the front of package labeling aspect of it will be passed. And so both standard, the intention is for them to work in tandem to assist the governments within the CARICOM region to move towards a robust nutrition educational program, as well as assisting with the formation of public health policies to assist with the reduction of NCDs. Now, what will the standard be applicable to once it has been published? The draft standard for nutritional labeling, it will be applicable to the nutritional labeling of prepackaged foods, and it will not address food weighed or measured in or counted into the package in the presence of the purchaser, provided that nutrition information is provided at the point of sale. It will also not address food intended for export only, which complies with the requirements of standards or laws on labeling of the country to which they are being exported. And I made mention earlier of different market access requirements. So if a CARICOM member state wishes to export to Europe or to Canada or to USA or wherever, then they will need to comply with the requirements of that particular country. And additionally, it will not apply to front of package labeling. And as I made mention, the FOPL aspect is currently being dealt with in the CRS-5. What are the different acts that currently exist that will relate to nutritional labeling and nutritional claims? We have the Standards Act of 1969, there's a Processed Food Act of 1959, and there's a Food and Drug Act of 1975. So we've dealt with a lot. We have dealt with defining claims, identifying the different types of claims. We've dealt with the different regulations that currently exist in Jamaica and CARICOM. And we've also dealt with those that are under construction. And so we want to now look at, after we've implemented all of these regulations and the system is put in place, what will be the benefit to the persons who will be most impacted? And this will be the food industry, this will be the consumers, and this will be the government. So let's begin with the food industry. So what are the benefits and implications for the food industry with the implementation of nutritional labeling and nutrition claims. There's an opportunity to produce more nutritious products, enhance product profile, provide effective communications tool, and increase international trade opportunities. Let's go from the bottom up. If we're looking at trade, and this ties in again to the concept of market access requirements. For different countries to trade, having a nutritional facts panel, it would make it easier, for example, companies who want to export to the US and Canada, where nutritional labeling is a mandatory requirement. It provides effective communications tool. It's a way of companies communicating with their customers by providing them with the necessary nutritional information. It enhances product profile and produces more nutritious products. How is this done? Nutritional labeling in some aspects can encourage product reformulation. And so in the end, it enhances product profile and the production of more nutritious products. For the consumer, which would be me and you, how would it benefit us? It will build our confidence. I know for me personally, when I go to the supermarket to purchase food, if I see a nutritional facts panel on a food item, I am more confident in the brand because they're providing me with information that I need, which is going to tie in with the additional benefit here is that having provided that information, I'm able to make better food choices, more educated food choices. And for the government who will be responsible for making laws, how will it benefit them? Now, nutritional labeling and claims, it supports the government's nutrition education activities to encourage consumers to practice nutrition principles when selecting foods and planning for meals. It provides a framework for public health policies and it supports food security. What are some of the opportunities from all of this discourse for Jamaica? The implementation of nutrition labeling, which we intend to be mandatory for both domestic and imported food products. Collaboration between pertinent ministries of government for the execution of nutrition education programs. Provision of incentives to encourage product reformulation. And ultimately, from all of this discourse and all of this implementation, we have better health outcomes, less pressure on the medical infrastructure. And the reference here for my presentation is the Codex guideline for the use of nutrition claims. And I open the floor for any questions. I'm more than willing to answer. And I thank you so much for your attention. If you need any further information or you do wish to make contact with me, my email address and my telephone number is so provided. Thank you so much for your attention. Have a good day.
2, 3. If I sugar you all give me in my bug juice. No give me none of that. What am I saying? And if I sugar you all give me in my box drink. No give me none of that.
You hear me now? Sugar can give you diabetes.
You can get very sick.
For real?
You can be hospitalized.
Don't look at me as if you're surprised. Read the label and you might understand. Get one. Eat right. Drink right.
Exercise.
Read the label and you might understand.